Welcome, Vault Dwellers. My name is Nacho Bidness, and we're taking a look today at the Long 15. It's Interstate 15 that runs south out of Vegas and into California. And we're taking a look at some in-game footage today because although this particular spot where the Long 15 crosses Nipton Road is not like a significant in-game location, it is a significant location, I guess, for me personally. So just a moment ago, we looked kind of to the south and towards California and the memorial where the NCR Rangers met the Desert Rangers of Nevada. And right now we're kind of looking over at the dry lake bed. And way off in the distance, we can just barely make out the town of Nipton. And off to the north here, we can see Primm, which is right on the border between California and Nevada. We're actually standing in California right now. And finally, kind of off to the left here, just a little bit up the road, is the California Highway Patrol Station, which has something of a real-world analog. Let's take a look at some of the photographs. All of these pictures were taken from the northbound on-ramp from Nipton Road onto I-15. And what I think is so cool about this spot in the real world in particular is just how many places across the entirety of a big chunk of the New Vegas map that we can pick out from this one spot. This view in particular is looking kind of southwest into the rest of California. In game, there is a hill that you can see that climbs up towards the NCR outpost. In the real world, that pass does exist, but you can't quite see it from here. There is a bend that is around that kind of shoulder to the rock that is in the middle of the screen. And once you get around that curve, you start to climb up towards the pass through the mountains. Turning it just a bit to the right and aiming further west, we can see the overpass. In the real world, of course, it's intact, and in game, it's crumbled. And as you pass through the area in game, you are very likely to encounter a bunch of fire ants, and potentially later in game, either Legion or NCR hit squads. In game, across the highway is a rest stop, convenience store, gas station type thing, where you can find some clues about what the Nipton mayor has been up to before the Legion shows up. In the real world, it just dead ends at some private property. There is nothing over there, and so that's why I don't have any pictures from that side of the highway. And if we turn around and face the other direction and look to the east, we can see some more features from the map in that off to the left of this photograph is a dry lake bed that is on the map, and you can encounter some more fire ants there as well as a racetrack. No racetrack in the real world, at least not yet. And also you can see the mountains here that form the spine of the New Vegas map. These mountains march directly down the center of the map and form a major barrier to east-west travel. I don't know if you're going to be able to make it out, especially if you're watching on a smaller screen like on a phone, but this picture also includes the town of Nipton. It is almost directly in the middle, and it is hard to make out, but it is there. It's just basically a slightly lighter smudge in the middle of all that yellowish background there. As I said, a little hard to see here, but it's there, and you can see it from the road interchange. I included this shot because it includes the Nipton Road, although it is a little bit hard to see. We're kind of looking southwest here, and we're looking across the road rather than down it. I wish I had a better picture from right at the interchange, because you can look down that road and it runs like a ruler just straight through the desert right into Nipton. But now we're getting into some of what I think are the best pictures. This picture looks to the north along I-15. It's actually kind of looking more northwest, and you can see the solar power station that Helios 1 was based on. Now this location in the real world is many miles to the west of the in-game location, and yet having it here and having one more spot that I can identify from this single spot that I stand in and just turn in a circle was, I think, kind of neat. The other thing that I like about this picture is that you can see just how it looks like 3 little stars have been dropped into the desert to make this power station. In this picture in the middle, we can see the port of entry for California. This is a gigantic combination of a weigh station for trucks where they weigh them up and make sure that they're not running overweight, and they're also inspecting agricultural products. California takes that really seriously because they have a thriving and extremely important to the country agricultural base. Basically, if it's not corn or wheat, there's a real good chance that they grew it in California. And you look at this and say, boy, the California Highway Patrol Station doesn't do a very good job of representing this. Except that I think maybe there's something in the lore that explains why this shrank down in the intervening years to the very small California Highway Patrol Station. Let me show you what I mean. If you didn't know, in Fallout lore, early in the 21st century, the United States was reorganized into 13 commonwealths. Now, we're used to hearing the word Commonwealth and thinking of the Massachusetts Commonwealth, which is, in this example, a smaller part, essentially a state-level entity inside the larger New England Commonwealth. The reason given in the lore was that they wanted to have a series of regional governments that could look out for state-level interests and serve as a buffer between the federal level and the state level. Behind the scenes, ultimately it was because the developers at Black Isle, when they were doing the original Fallout, thought that the American flag looked cooler, quote-unquote, with 13 stars rather than a full 50. And given the limited technology available at the time they were making that game, I also have to think that it may have been something of a limitation for them that they may not have been able to show a flag with 50 stars on it. So they came up with this 13 Commonwealths idea, and if you notice, in the Southwest, Nevada and the southern part of California are in the same Commonwealth. And so there wouldn't be a big port of entry for that particular border crossing because it wasn't actually a border crossing. I have to wonder if maybe I am just playing too much Fallout and reading too much into the lore, or maybe giving too much credit to Black Isle. After all, they are the original developers, and I have a great deal of admiration and respect for them. I digress. If we zoom in a little bit from the prior picture, we can just barely make out, shimmering on the horizon as it were, the town of Primm. And if you look very closely, I think you can kind of just barely make out on the right side of the road in the picture here, the roller coaster in the real world, it is the Buffalo Bill Hotel, Resort, and Casino. In Fallout New Vegas, it is the Bison Steve. Either way, there is a roller coaster there, and we'll talk about that more on the episode from Primm. If you look even further up the road, eventually you kind of lose sight in the haze. But if you stand in this spot, In the real world after dark, you can definitely see the glow of the Vegas lights on the horizon from here. The last picture here shows a little bit more of the dry lake bed and that same mountain range that moves essentially north and south in the real world and on the new Vegas map. Travel far enough in that direction and you're likely to encounter some super mutants, or if you happen to find the hidden pass to the hidden valley, you may encounter some rad scorpions. I don't know what's out there in the real world, but I bet there are some nasty poisonous snakes and some real world, not giant scorpions, but bad enough scorpions. I mentioned at the top of this video that this is a significant location for me personally. And that's because in 2015, I decided to take a trip to the southwest United States on a vacation. And although visiting Fallout locations was not the primary goal of that trip, it was something that I had in mind. I flew into Salt Lake City and took a beautiful drive from there down into Zion National Park and along the shores of Lake Mead to Hoover Dam and into Las Vegas. And that trip was good and worthy and fun all on its own. But once I got to Vegas, I did have the goal of visiting a few real world locations, and I started out and went to Good Springs, and I was too shy to go into the general store or talk to anybody there. And that's part of my own social anxiety and shyness and just part of my nature. And when I got to Prim was quite a bit different from what was in game. There was certainly an awful lot to be recognized, but there were also differences and they were glaring. But I stopped here at this crossroads, and it was because I was in a rental car and I just wanted to step out and have a cigarette. And as I stood here, I realized that I was experiencing a very strong sense of deja vu. It was overwhelming, and this sense that I had been to this place before, and it finally hit me that in a way I had. And it was right then that I caught the bug. This new hobby that I knew I was going to really treasure and enjoy. I wouldn't be able to do it often. I can't afford to travel that much. But that would just make it all the more precious each time I got to indulge. Even though I had already seen Zion National Park, Hoover Dam, Good Springs, and Prim, this was the first place where I was fully immersed in the world of the game, and I knew that I had not allowed myself enough time on this trip to explore the Mojave Wasteland as much as I was going to want to. I also knew in that moment that I would probably be taking a trip to Washington, D.C. at that point. And although Fallout 4 had not been released at this time, I knew it was coming, in that, yeah, I was probably going to be going to Boston at some point too. At the time, I did not have a YouTube channel, and it didn't matter to me that I was not sharing these experiences with others. Fallout is, after all, a single-player game, and it is by design a somewhat lonely experience, and I was fine with that feeling, standing here in the middle of nowhere, looking out at the desert. I was reveling in it, and that has just stuck with me ever since. And if there's any point during this series of in real life locations where I can maybe hope to implore you to maybe make a similar trip for yourself, this is it. So, what do you think? Would you like to travel to Fallout locations in real life and have this sort of experience for yourself? Have you already traveled to some Fallout locations and do you have a story that you'd like to share? Or am I just a crazy person who plays way too many video games? I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments below. Regarding the future of this series, I have lots more Fallout New Vegas locations to cover, but I think it's time to take a break from the Mojave and go look at some other parts of the country. And I certainly hope that you're looking forward to that. If you are, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so that you know when I drop those videos. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like. If you did not like this video, please tell me why in a comment, because constructive criticism is the best way that I know how to grow as a content creator. Until then, my name is Nacho Bidness, and I'm saying it's a great big wasteland out there. Let's go have fun in it.